What happens if somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19? Is there any insurance coverage for that? Welcome to the How Insurance Works podcast. If we have not yet met here, my name is Mike McGilvery. I'm a second-generation licensed property and casualty insurance broker and agent at Shaw Moses Mendenhall & Associates in Southern California. My goal is to help educate and inform on various aspects of insurance and the insurance industry. The content in this podcast should not be considered insurance advice and is for general informational purposes only. Insurance forms and endorsements vary based on insurance company changes. In addition, dates, regulations, court decisions, and state jurisdiction, so please consult with your agent for further advice. The topic on today's podcast stems from an interview I did with an industry publication last month called Insurance Business America, and I'd like to thank Insurance Business America and their writer, Bethan Moorcraft, for graciously reaching out to me to collect my thoughts on a topic that a lot of Insurance Business America's readers are asking about and a topic a lot of our clients are asking about. And that topic is this: what if somebody accuses me of giving them COVID-19? Is there any insurance coverage? The title of the article with Insurance Business America was aptly titled, quote, "You gave me COVID-19," end quote. And what I'd like to do in the podcast is share the thoughts I shared with Insurance Business America. What if somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19? Perhaps they're a guest at your home. Before addressing the topic, a few disclaimers that I'd like to lay out at the beginning. Number one, only your insurance company can tell you if a claim is going to be accepted or denied. So if somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19, they file a lawsuit against you, you decide to submit a claim to your insurance company, it is only the insurance company that can tell you if a claim is accepted or denied. Myself, as an insurance broker and agent, can't tell my clients whether a claim is going to be accepted or denied. That's under the purview of the insurance company. What we can do is we can examine the policy and the policy language and interpret what is most likely to happen, and we can speak generally about it, which we're going to do in this podcast, and we're going to look at a couple policies as an illustration. Disclaimer number two, we're addressing this topic in situations that are not intentional. As you'll see here later in the podcast, most insurance policies have an intentional act exclusion in them. And what this means is if we intentionally get somebody sick, if we intentionally cause bodily harm to somebody, most insurance policies are not going to cover that, almost all, safe to say all, because intentional acts are excluded in insurance policies. So are you covered? Are you not covered? Well, we're going to examine that here right now in the podcast. Now, understand this is a very hard thing to prove. Somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19. That is, again, hard to prove. From what I understand right now, still the incubation time of COVID-19 is 10 days. How can they actually prove where they got it? But in this environment, anyone can sue anybody else for anything at any time, even if it's frivolous, baseless, or groundless. And in those cases, we may need our insurance company at least to help us with defense. So how do we know if we do have coverage? Where do we start in examining this? Well, where we want to start is if you're a homeowner, we're going to start with your homeowner's policy. If you're a condo owner, we're going to look at your condo owner's policy. Specifically in those policies, we want to look for your personal liability or your personal general liability. This is coverage in your policy that protects you if you cause bodily injury, that includes sickness and disease, or property damage to another person. And likely in your homeowner's policy or condo owner's policy, you probably have $300,000 or $500,000 worth of coverage. And again, that is to protect you if you cause bodily harm or property damage to another person. If you grab your policy and you read through it, this is where we're going to start. I'm going to read through some policies right now. If you'd like to grab your policy and follow along, there are two areas we're concerned with. In your policy, in the beginning of your policy, whether it's your homeowner's or condo owner's policy, we first want to go to the definitions section of that policy. I'm going to do it with you with a policy in front of me. That's a condo owner's policy. And for those of you watching the video on either YouTube, or you can visit our website, www.howinsuranceworks.co, where I post videos of these podcasts, I'm going to actually have the policy language on that video. So if you'd like, go to howinsuranceworks.co. You can watch the video of the podcast and follow along with me as we read through policy language. So we want to go to the definitions of our policy, and I'm going to do that right now with the first policy we're looking at, which is a condo owner's policy. In the definitions, I'm specifically looking for the word bodily, or the words bodily injury. And in this condo owner's policy, it's right in front of me. We first want to see how the insurance policy is defining bodily injury. In this particular policy I have in front of me, and I quote, "Bodily injury means physical harm to the body, including sickness or disease, and resulting death, except that bodily injury does not include A. venereal disease, B. herpes, C. acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, D. AIDS-related complex, ARC, E. human immunodeficiency virus, HIV." So in the definition, sometimes you can get clues as to what's covered and what's not. In this particular policy, what they are telling us is in our personal liability that they will cover if we get somebody cause sickness or disease to somebody else. They're defining that as bodily injury, except if we give them a venereal disease, herpes, AIDS, ARC, or HIV. So it's important to know how the policy is defining the terms. After we read through the definitions, the next part of the policy we want to check is the liability portion of your policy. Now, in most policies, this is going to be Section 2. Property is Section 1. So we're going to go to Section 2. And what we want to read are the exclusions in your liability. And we want to, this is essentially the area of the policy where the insurance company is telling you, here is what we're not going to cover you for. These are all things that are excluded. It's important to read through the exclusions to see if you might have coverage if somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19. So in this particular condo owner's policy, we go to the liability section and we're going to read some of these exclusions. Number 1 is not a surprise. Remember earlier in the podcast, we talked about the intentional act exclusion. Well, that is the first exclusion in this policy. I will quote, "We do not cover any bodily injury or property damage intended by or which may reasonably be expected to result from the intentional or criminal acts or omissions of any insured person," unquote. What they're telling us here is if you cause bodily injury or property damage to another person intentionally, we are not going to cover that. No surprise there. It's in almost all insurance policies. Now, what we want to do is read through the rest of the exclusions and see, is there a specific exclusion for communicable disease? And as I read through the rest of the exclusions in this policy, there is not a specific exclusion for communicable disease in this policy. Now, by reading through the exclusions and looking at the definitions, we get an idea that in this particular condo owner's policy, if we cause bodily injury, sickness, or disease to another person, likely coverage might and may be provided as long as it's not venereal disease, herpes, AIDS, ARC, or HIV. It doesn't say anything about COVID. Insurance policies very well may include the words COVID-19 as they rewrite their forms after the pandemic, but as of now, this policy, interpreting the language, seems to say that they will cover, if somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19, since that isn't specifically listed in the policy, and there is no broad communicable disease exclusion, this policy very well might cover you if you're accused by somebody else of saying that you gave them COVID-19. Now, what happens if it's a groundless, frivolous claim? Well, because it likely is covered in this policy, even if it's a frivolous or groundless claim, the insurance company still has a duty to defend you. So they will still pay for defense costs to essentially make the case go away. Let's look at another policy. And I want to show another policy because I want to show you how different policies can be and how important it is, if you're concerned about this, to go through your homeowner's policy or condo policy and look at your personal liability, look at the exclusions and definitions. Here is a second policy. This is a homeowner's policy. And I want to read through this. We're going to do the same thing we did on the condo owner's policy. I'm going to go to the definitions. I'm going to look for bodily injury. And I'm going to read through what this policy says. Quote, "Bodily injury means bodily harm, sickness, or disease, including required care, loss of services, and death that results," unquote. And again, we're going to have this on the podcast video. You can see this at howinsuranceworks.co. Watch a video of this podcast. You'll be able to see the policy language there on the video. So in reading through this form, we see how they define bodily injury. Looking pretty good. We have sickness or disease in there. So after the definitions, we're going to do the same thing we did in the condo owner's policy. We're going to go to the liability section, and we want to find our exclusions. Now, before doing that, I wanted to read a little bit more just under the liability section here before we get to the exclusions, because I want to show where it says, yes, if an act is groundless or fraudulent, coverage may be there. Again, it has to be covered in the policy, but bear with me here. We're just going to read under personal liability. Quote, if a claim is made or a suit is brought against an insured for damages because of bodily injury, unquote, and here's what they'll pay, quote, pay up to the limit of liability for the damages for which an insured is legally liable, unquote. All that means is we're going to pay $300,000 or $500,000, whatever your limit is. Quote, we're going to provide a defense at our expense by counsel of our choice, even if the suit is groundless, false, or fraudulent, unquote. Now, the reason I want to bring that up is that can be a little misleading in a policy. What they're essentially telling you here is that, yeah, even if a suit is groundless, false, or fraudulent, we'll still provide defense at our expense. But what we have to understand here is that's only if, whatever that alleged act is, that's only if it's covered in the policy. We'll read on. And I just did want to point that out in this policy. So in the same way we did on the other condo policy, we're going to go to our exclusions, our liability exclusions. And the first exclusion, again here, no surprise, we run into the intentional act exclusion. Quote, expected or intended injury, bodily injury or property damage which is expected or intended by an insured, unquote. That is excluded. Back to our intentional act exclusion, no surprise there. But in this particular policy, as we read on, we get to a sixth exclusion. That exclusion is called communicable disease. Quote, communicable disease, bodily injury or property damage which arises out of the transmission of a communicable disease by an insured, unquote. So in this policy, they have a broad exclusion for communicable disease, meaning that if you give anybody any communicable disease, and we certainly know COVID is a communicable disease, this is not going to be covered in the policy. Which also means, because it's not covered in the policy, if anybody accuses you of giving them COVID-19 and it is a groundless, baseless claim, the insurance company in this instance does not have a duty to defend because it is not covered in the policy. It certainly isn't likely that it's covered, and that's how I'm interpreting the language of the policy, which seems pretty strong. Again, it's only the insurance company that can tell you if something is covered or not, if a claim will be accepted or denied, but interpreting the language, it's likely it wouldn't be covered in this particular policy. So if you are concerned, if somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19, definitely go over your policy with your agent, review your liability section, review the exclusions. That after this pandemic, many insurance policies will likely include the words COVID-19, but as of now, these two policies, very different, but one of them really only excludes 5 different things. Now, if you're concerned, let's say you do have a policy where it may be covered, and you're concerned that $300,000 or $500,000 is not enough money, then you can protect yourself further with an umbrella policy. The podcast last week, we talked about the value of personal umbrellas. If you're watching this on YouTube and you went to howinsuranceworks.co and are watching the video, I'll leave a link to that video, to that podcast on personal umbrellas and why they are so valuable. But if you're concerned that somebody accuses you of giving them COVID-19, that maybe you have coverage in your policy, that person does get sick, is on a ventilator, their medical bills pile up, and $300,000 or $500,000 in your homeowners or condo policy is not enough, you can buy a personal umbrella for $1 million to go over that, and that would give you $1.3 or $1.5 million more, just in case medical bills pile up, just in case it's a protracted lawsuit. So just know you can buy a personal umbrella. They're very, very cost effective, one of the most cost effective coverages in the industry. Hopefully that podcast was helpful. Again, if you're concerned about this type of liability, somebody accusing you of giving them COVID-19, talk with your agent about it, see what solutions are available to you. For any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me directly, Mike Mack at howinsuranceworks.co. That's Mike Mack at howinsuranceworks.co. You can visit our website at www.howinsuranceworks.co. Again, I hope that was helpful. Stay safe. We'll see you on the next podcast.